7:01, let's get started. I want to thank everyone for joining tonight's Manhattan City Council Candidates Education Forum. I'm excited to be here along with Kaushik Das, who will be my co-host tonight, and the joke maker. This event is sponsored by Place New York City, which advocates for a high-quality, challenging education for every student in all New York City DOE public schools by increasing the academic rigor of all school curricula. We are one of the fastest growing parent-led advocacy groups. And before we get started, I'd like to share our candidate selection process for tonight's forum. Questionnaires from Place went out in early January to all candidates in the Manhattan City Council race. Candidates who responded and were most aligned with our advocacy were invited to join our event tonight. And with that, I would like to welcome Susan Lee of District 1, Maron of District 1, Leslie Murphy of District 3, Julie Menin of District 5, Maria Danzilo of District 6, and due to a previous engagement, Gail Brewer of District 6 will be joining us at 7:30 or sooner if possible. So now I would like for each of you to introduce yourselves a bit, but rather than the standard introduction, what we decided would be more fun is if you told us about your K to 12 experience and throw in whatever you'd like, what you liked, what you didn't like, and how you see that affecting your choices and your views going forward. So let's start with Susan Lee. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Place, for hosting this forum. I came to this country at the age of 6, so I missed the K part, but I came here as a first grader. And everything was new to me. And I remember on the plane ride here to United States, I had limited English and I asked for apple juice. And in Chinese, it's literally called apple water. And so the flight attendant gave me an apple and a glass of water. So that just kind of thrown me into the English as a second language experience. But I went to school in the Lower East Side, and my mom, when she was working at the factories, overheard about this school up in the Upper East Side called Wagner that offered excellent education. They had a special progress program, and my mom's friends encouraged her to enroll me at Wagner. So from there, I did well at the school, and a guidance counselor actually encouraged me to take the SAT exam. My parents both worked at factories, so they didn't have any money for prep courses. I don't even know if prep courses were available at that time, but they bought me prep books from this used bookstore in Chinatown, and that's how I practiced these entrance exams. And I went on to Brooklyn Tech, where I had a rigorous education. And I met a lot of students from all walks of life while I was there at Brooklyn Tech. And then I went on to Barnard College and NYU for my master's.
Robin, I think you're muted. Hold on, we can fix that.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to keep the background noise of my children screaming down. Maron, will you please tell us a little bit about your experience?
Sure. No one has actually ever asked about education in that way before, so it's interesting. My first schooling was actually on a military base in Quantico, Virginia. That was where I attended kindergarten. And then my family moved from Virginia to Pennsylvania. And then, like Susan, I went to Barnard College, and then I went to Cardozo Law School and became a public defender. The reality is, in my K through 12 education, my parents always had access in different states and in different ways to an education that was nearby, that was safe, and that was really high quality. And I think quite clearly that's what we need for all the families in New York City, and it's what we should be able to take for granted and what we're really far away from. We need so much work to get there. And I think, and I'm, very grateful to parents like the parents who participate in Place and other groups that really spend so much time volunteering to try to improve our schools.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maud. And next. Leslie Murphy.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go back a little bit because I think my education started early. I'm actually the proud granddaughter of immigrants, and all four of my grandparents fled Armenian genocide and ended up here in New York City, not knowing a stitch of English. So my father grew up very poor, but was able to go to Stuyvesant. And then he went to City College for free. And then, unfortunately, he and my mom thought that maybe it would be better for the kids to get an education outside the city. So I was in the suburbs, and it was a boring suburbs of education from K through 12. But what stuck with me was that when I went through grades 1 through 6, sometimes they would take me out of my regular class and they would put me in another class separate from other kids, right? With like maybe 6 or 7 other kids. I didn't know. We would do puzzles, we would do different games, and then they would put me back in the classroom. And what I realized afterwards, at the time I didn't know, I was young, was that that was their version of accelerated learning. That was their version. It wasn't exclusive in one school. It wasn't separated. It wasn't segregated. You were with your regular class. And then when they identified someone that had a talent in a specific course, that's where they put you. And I think that really, really formed me, and why I guess we'll talk about it as we get further into the forum on how I feel about accelerated learning and gifted education learning. And then after high school, I went to Temple University in Philadelphia, and I guess the rest of that. Now I'm here. We'll fast forward to present day.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie. Julie Menin, can you tell us about your experience?
Yes, absolutely. And first of all, thank you so much for having this forum, and it's great to be with everyone. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I went to school there and then went to college at Columbia and Northwestern Law School, and I now teach at Columbia. So I'm actually going to focus on my mother's education because that was what was most formative to me. My mother came to this district as a Holocaust survivor from Hungary. She attended LaGuardia, and LaGuardia was formative for her because her educational experience coming here as an immigrant, still learning English, but her love for the arts helped her deal with, quite frankly, a very painful child having survived the Holocaust. And I think that my views of schools are really very much informed by what my mother's experience was, because LaGuardia was honestly a salvation for her and set her on the path that really changed her life so much for the better.
Wow. It's impressive. Maria Danzilo, can you please tell us your experience? Maria, I think you're still muted. If you can unmute yourself. Maria? I think you're still muted. There you go. You're set.
We good? Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for having me. I grew up in Midwood, Brooklyn. I attended public school and then Catholic school. I went to St. Agnes Seminary, which was a small all girls Catholic school that my mother attended as well. My parents are immigrants. Their parents, they were first generation. And I went to St. Agnes Seminary because my mother felt that it was important that we have an all girls education. That was very important to her, that we did that, and I did not enjoy it. We rode the bus up Avenue J, Brooklyn, through Midwood, and I would pass the yeshiva of Flatbush and think to myself and say to my mother, why are we going to St. Agnes Seminary? I belong at that school. And of course thought that was a kind of a strange thing, but I subsequently learned that I had one grandparent who was Jewish and had to convert. So it was kind of interesting that I learned that later on in life. My father was a World War II veteran for 11 years, and he attended college on the VA bill. He had fought in World War II and the Korean War, and he was from a family where education was extremely important. So I worked hard during high school. I graduated. I really wanted to go to a different kind of learning environment, and I attended CUNY Brooklyn College. I really wanted to go to a big public university. That was very important to me. My parents, for just even though all of my cousins had attended Midwood High School, they still wanted me to stay in Catholic high school. So I went on to Brooklyn Law School. I worked my way through, and then NYU Law School. And I married my husband, who actually was a graduate of Midwood High School. So it was kind of full circle. He grew up very close to us in Midwood, Brooklyn. So here I am today.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for sharing those personal experiences. It's always interesting to hear, and it's a nice way to get to know you without the typical candidate statements. So thank you for sharing that. And now I will throw it to Kush.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you all candidates for the interesting background, especially on the education side. Next, we're going to go over some ground rules for tonight. It's instruction to all the candidates. This is a forum, not a debate. It's an opportunity for us to learn more about each of you. As such, we're going to start with 5 open-ended questions. The speaking order was randomly selected and will vary for each question. Over the course of all the questions, each candidate will have an opportunity to speak at the beginning and at the end. If that's confusing, don't worry about it. We'll try to post the order in the chat, and Robin and I will certainly guide you through it. I'll let you know who's up next. Each candidate will be allowed 1.5 minutes to answer each open-ended question. We may interrupt you at that time, asking you to wrap up. Following all the open-ended questions, there will be a brief lightning round with yes, no, and multiple choice questions. More on that to come later. And with that, we'll jump straight into the questions. Robin, you want to take away the first question? You're muted again.
All right. Our first question. Many parents across the city are concerned about the ongoing delays in fully reopening schools, and they fear that they will not be fully reopened by the fall against the backdrop of the teachers' union, which has been raising concerns about safety. What would be your approach to ensuring that all students who want 5-day-a-week in-person instruction will receive it? Unless there's a medical exemption, should all children and teachers return in person to the classroom in September? And for this question, we will start with Maria Danzilo.
I had a feeling I was going first. I don't know why. So I'm completely in favor of opening the schools fully and immediately. I learned recently there is a lawsuit brought by a group of parents. Actually, there are a couple of parents in my district who are named plaintiffs in that lawsuit to ask New York City, the Department of Education, to fully open the schools. In terms of a plan, we have a lost year. We have to face it. We have to deal with it. And it's reality. So I'd like to see summer school. I'd like to see expanded hours. I think we need to do that. We need to get our kids caught up. I think Zoom, look, our teachers worked really hard. I've spoken with a lot of teachers in my community while out campaigning. The teachers have worked hard, and I think that they need to be appreciated for their hard work, but we have a lost year here and we have to deal with it. One more point I want to make is for the moms. We have Mother's Day coming up. I spoke with a bunch of moms over the last couple of weeks while campaigning. I honestly don't know how they did it. Moms who are working, there are a lot of loss of jobs. Women, I read recently statistics that women were have left the workforce in the highest numbers. This is something we really have to deal with. It's very impactful to women and their future career opportunities. So we have to deal with that. So we need to get our kids back to school. We need to get them fully reopened. We need to deal with the lost year, and we have to address the impact it has had on families, especially the parents.
Thank you. Julie Menin.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to get our schools fully reopened. I have a 3-year-old daughter. Seeing her in and out of school and away from her friends and learning is very upsetting as a parent. It's time to get our kids back to school. What I didn't get to say in my introduction is I'm a 3-time city commissioner. I've served as a commissioner of 3 agencies, starting in the Bloomberg administration. I believe I have very unique experience to bring to bear here, dealing directly with DOE, dealing with the the UFT, bringing all the stakeholders to the table to say 100% we need to get our kids back in school. All the studies are showing that with remote learning, we're losing between 6 to 9 months of learning. This is absolutely unacceptable. We cannot allow this to continue. And our kids have lost a critical social interaction component. We're going to be dealing, quite honestly, with the ramifications of remote learning for years, and we cannot afford to lose another year. So I would be deeply committed as a council member to bringing the parties to the table to ensure that our schools are fully reopened. Thank you.
Thank you. Maud Maron.
Or am I unmuted? Yes, I am. I've talked about this a lot. Reopening our schools is incredibly important. I will just point out that, I'm running for city council, but we have in our city mayoral control. The mayor's in control of what happens in our school system. And, the mayor didn't have to ask any union's permission to close our schools. The mayor just decided to close our schools. And the mayor has the power and the authority to open our schools. It is really unacceptable. And we would need our city council people. I mean, all of us running for city council here, if we were to win, would not be sworn in until January of next year. But the reality is we need our city council people to acknowledge that what's keeping our schools closed is entirely political. It's not a public health situation. It's 100% political. And, we need politicians and we need our candidates to stand up and say, all of our other unions went back to work. They went back to work. Sometimes our doctors and our nurses went back to work even without adequate PPE. It is well past time to have our schools fully reopened. We know we can do it safely, and it's just absolutely unacceptable. And we need more politicians to stand up. I understand people say that we need to bring everyone to the table. I think we're beyond that at this point. Normally, I am a very big proponent of bringing people to the table and having conversations with everybody, but this is a situation where it's really clear. Children are being asked to bear the burden of being out of school in a way that's just unacceptable and not justified by any actual facts, and we have to be governed by facts and science.
Thank you. Leslie Murphy, how do you feel?
So I think what we have to do first is put a priority solely on in-person learning. And I think that was a big mistake last year when they were trying, the DOE, the city was trying to split the baby. They were trying to get a good blended learning and full-time remote learning thing going. And they were also trying to get an in-person learning curriculum going. And neither one of them worked out very well. I think we have seen New York City's public schools, we've seen remarkably low virus transmission rates. Last fall to winter, 200,000 were tested in schools. I think it was like 0.4 came back positive. And even then the transmission from those were incredibly low. So you asked what I would do. I would make sure that the ventilation in each of the schools was up to par. I would also make sure that contact tracing was in place. I think though these are going to diminish by the time fall gets around. And these are already in place in many of our schools, but they're not in some others. I think there were two giant failings of this past year when it comes to the reopening. One was a lack of a comprehensive plan to start with. I think we all know this. And I understand back then we didn't know how it was transmitted. We didn't know who was a super spreader and who was vulnerable. Now we do. And as we had more understanding, the second failing was we were able to start quantifying certain results and there was little to no adjustment. So I think, like we asked for last year, we want a plan. I think the same ask should be now, prioritizing in-person learning 100%.
Okay, thank you so much. Lastly, Susan Lee.
Thank you. So I agree with everyone, what their comments were. And we do need our kids to go back to school as soon as possible. There has been loss in learning. Also, the social interaction. What I am also concerned about is kids being behind the screen or not participating in in remote learning, perhaps there might be some kind of abuse at home that are detected because they're not exposed, they're not in the environment of the school where guidance counselors or social workers can observe, evidence or instances of abuse. So that's a concern to me, is that we are letting children potentially slip through the cracks. Now, I do agree with Maria on her point of summer school. I think it's really important. I think our kids lost a year of learning and they need to be in school. I do support, the teachers got priority in fully getting vaccinated. I think that, we need to push for full vaccination. Right now, as of today, we vaccinated over 5.8 million people. I think that we can continue to do that. And with increased vaccination, the rate of positivity rate will decrease. Like right now, the positivity rate is at 4.6%. So we're well on our way to getting the numbers down and possibly reopening schools.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's move on to the next question. Kush?
Okay, for our next question. New York City and the Department of Education specifically were braced for significant budget cuts, which would have untold repercussions to our schools. However, with significant federal funding coming to the Department of Education, this question has two parts. Part one, in your opinion, what would be your top 3 priorities for those funds? And part two, how would you propose to sustain those priorities after federal funding has ceased? We're going to be a little bit more strict on time on this because we have beefier questions yet to come, but we're going to start with Susan Lee on this one.
Bush, can you repeat the second part of the question, please?
Yes. How would you propose to sustain those priorities after federal funding has dried up?
Okay, great. Okay, so one of the 3 priorities are bridging the technological divide, getting schools up to date in terms of their technology. I want to propose funding in high poverty schools, underachieving schools, so that they are on par, they get their funding. And the third one is to get, like I said before, mental health services, guidance counselors. I think that's really important. And I think those are the 3 funding priorities that I will focus on. And, after the money is gone, I will advocate for those funding through legislation. We will look at perhaps where we can cut the waste. I know that a lot of times we submit contracts and they're always over the contract budget. So I would rein in on those contracts to outside consultants. That's how I would propose reining in the budget for funding these programs.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Next up is Maud Maron. Your thoughts?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the sustaining. I don't think it makes any sense to start programs that we're not able to continue. There's been some discussion about 3K programs and how to have universal 3K program. I think there's great value in universal 3K, but I think we have to have a commitment to, and I would like to see it, but I think we have to have a commitment to keep it moving forward. The chief most important thing that we need to put money towards, and now we have actually a fair amount of money, and I will point out that because of Fair Student funding, we actually have a progressive structure of where the money follows the kids, and we actually are able to give, the money per student fairly to kids, regardless of zip code in this city. Literacy programs and high quality curriculum to make sure that all children know how to read. Assessments in place at every level, particularly in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade, because we know that those are crucial years to teach children how to read. All of the education that goes on beyond 3rd grade becomes a lot less meaningful if we haven't done our job of making sure the children can read. So the high quality curriculum and making sure that we have assessments in place to make sure that the children are actually getting and achieving full literacy would be where we should start with spending the money.
Well done, and on time as well. Julie Menin, you're up next.
Sure. Well, I have to say, as the city census director, we beat almost every other city across the country and are going to be delivering $1.5 billion a year in federal funds specifically for public education, and that's each year for the next 10 years. In terms of three issues and there's so many, so I do want to say it's very hard to just say three because I think the ones that have been mentioned, I totally agree with. So I'll try to focus on new elements, but certainly we need to build more school seats. When I chaired Community Board 1 for 7 years, we built 3 new public schools to address overcrowding. We have many schools in this city with no art room, no computer room, kids eating lunch at 10 in the morning, none of which are acceptable. And we really need to focus on making sure that we're addressing school overcrowding. I do agree on the digital divide. We've got a situation in the city where actually 1/3 of New Yorkers lack access to broadband. This is unacceptable. So many of them are students. We have to once and for all, as a city, really address that. And then lastly, we need to increase the number of teachers. I really do believe that because in many classes, we do not have enough teachers. And so I'd really like to see that increased as well. And how we pay for it, we need people who are experienced to go into the city council budget. I do believe as a 3-time city commissioner, I know how to do that, to go into the budget and cut areas. Under this mayor, for example, City Hall staff and special advisors have increased by over 204%. We have the Thrive program, a $1.2 billion program with not a lot of data metrics to support it. So I would focus on some of those areas to make cuts and then make sure that we're increasing funding to public education.
Okay, thank you for that. Next up is Maria Danzilo. And you are muted, I want to warn you.
I'd like to do all of the things everyone else mentioned, but I'll give you my top 3. So first, I would start with a smaller class size and more teachers in the early years. I'd like to see us focus more heavily on pre-K, K, first, second grades, having very small classes, very rigorous educational environment for our youngest learners. I want to make sure there are specialized teachers in the classrooms who can identify learning issues and get children into programs that will help children who have a learning difference or a learning issue that's going to hold them back. I think we're not doing enough to diagnose that at an early age. I am the mother of 3 children. I have 3 very different learners, very different styles. And I was very fortunate to participate in an early intervention program that enabled everybody in the city, it's a public program, to get access to the kinds of tools that are needed. But it's hard to get access to those programs if you're not aware of them. So we need to do more in the public schools to make sure parents are learning about and hearing and get access to the kinds of tools that they need to do early intervention. So my first priority is smaller class size in the early years. I do agree with the technology divide. I would have to put that on the top 3 list as well. We really need to get every child in New York City broadband, make sure that they have the access to technology. We can't have some children having access and others not having. And the third, I think, would be mental health. We are spending, we've done better on that, but I think we need to continue to focus on mental health, getting kids, especially in middle school and high school. We have a severe problem with anxiety and depression in our youth, and that has to get addressed. My platform includes combating mental illness as a major component of my platform. We need to do that.
Sorry, I need to interrupt for one moment, though. Yes. I do want to give you, you've run up on time, but I do want to give you a quick opportunity to respond to how you would sustain those priorities.
Sure. So 2 things, I'll make it really quick. So DEA staffing budget has risen by 21% from 2014 to 2019. So I'd look to cut administrative overhead and move some of that into the classroom. And 2, I just want to say, if we can get our schools working again and we can offer high quality public education, we're going to have a tax base that's going to help us continue to provide great public service, public schools to our city. So I would say we're going to pay for that by providing a service that's going to make New York City the place where everybody wants to be to raise their kids.
Great, thank you. Next up, Leslie Murphy.
Yes, the 3 things I would do. Number 1, support systems. Absolutely. The wraparound services are crucially important. And by not investing in this now, we are paying big costs later. It's penny wise, pound foolish. We need school counselors, teaching assistants, school nurses, recess coaches, all these wraparound services that give our teachers and our principals and our educators support is very important. Number two is definitely the digital divide, as everyone else is saying. But specifically, I've been talking through COVID with a lot of our principals. The number one thing they're asking for, because I'm on the budget task force of our community board district, where we advocate for what should be in our budget and what we should prioritize. And the number one thing they're asking for is digital libraries, because that's where it's going. Learning devices, and not just the learning devices, but the maintenance system, because when they get the iPads, they're breaking down, and how we can fix those quickly. And the third thing is not really necessarily specific in-class education, but I do want to concentrate on it, is building the infrastructure of some of these schools. I'm talking ACs and ventilation. I'm talking crumbling buildings. I went into Manhattan Bridges, which is a high school in my district. They don't even have a library or science labs, and this is a high school. So we need that infrastructure in place to have our kids at least have a level playing field of gain a good education.
Again, sorry to interrupt, but
Yep,
you're running up on a minute 30. Sustainability quickly.
Absolutely. I'm a very, very big proponent. I've been banging the drums on pilot programs. We need a pilot program in the city. I think we're the only big city. In fact, I know we are, that our city council has not advocated for a pilot program. Columbia University pays zero taxes as a nonprofit on their land. Other Ivy Leagues in every other city, except for Penn, I believe, has a pilot program. And that is worth hundreds of millions of dollars right there. Their endowments are growing by the billions. That's with a B. And I think a payment in lieu of taxes program is sorely needed in New York City and long overdue.
All right, thank you so much. This is a very interesting question, in my opinion, and I'm glad I'm the one who gets to ask it. The original question was about gifted and talented. Please tell us your views on gifted and talented admissions, including thoughts on objective and/or subjective measures and ways to increase diversity. What are your thoughts on ways the program should be structured going forward? And specifically, should the DOE continue the current system of distinct gifted and talented classrooms and schools? In light of today, we have been hearing rumors that discussions have been going on behind closed doors and in secret about the future of gifted and talented programs, and without any links or anyone representing any gifted and talented interests. So I'd love to add that into my question, and I'd love to hear your views. So incorporate that however you see fit. And we're going to start with Julie Menin, and I'd like to beat Kush on timing. So go for it, Julie.
Okay, absolutely. So I believe our gifted and talented programs are very important, and I'd actually like to see them expanded to a broader, more diverse audience, as children, quite frankly, at that age should have the opportunity to be able to attend those schools and have them close to home. With that said, I think we can broaden our gifted and talented programs, and we should broaden them, and we should ensure that the maximum number of diverse students are able to have access. So, how do we do that? Well, we can do that in a number of different ways. We should be building more G&T programs, in communities all across the city, not eradicating them, in my opinion. We should be giving more students access to these programs and making sure that every child who is eligible for those programs is able to attend it. I also think, and I talk to parents in District 5 all the time, who want to talk to me about G&T, we have to make sure that parental input is really being considered at DOE, because so many times I keep hearing the same refrain that, and to your question, it's a top-down approach rather than working with parents and seeking parental input. But certainly I can speak about District 5 and the G&T programs we have, lower lab, and I speak to lower lab parents all the time. These programs are important and we should expand them. And of course we can diversify them. I don't believe, by the way, this whole notion that these two concepts of are mutually exclusive. I think we absolutely can have our G&T programs. We can give more access to a more diverse group, and we can actually be expanding our G&Ts all over the city.
And Julie, do you think that gifted and talented connections or anyone with inside information to gifted and talented programs or experience or educators should be involved in advising to the future of these programs?
I just want to make sure I heard the question correctly. You're asking, should G&T educators be involved in terms of the future of G&T? Or you think G&T parents?
Anyone with experience. I guess that's an open-ended question. Or should this be happening with people who have no experience or prior knowledge of the business?
Absolutely, we need to be involving G&T parents, G&T educators. I speak to G&T educators in our district and parents in our district all the time. And I think both parties feel sort of left out of the decision-making process. And that is not good, in my opinion. We need to be making sure that both G&T educators and G&T parents are having a direct dialogue with DOE about the importance of the programs and expanding them. And by the way, I think by getting that input, that it will be a way that we can really work to the goal of diversifying the programs, of expanding the programs and making sure that as many children as possible and the broadest, most diverse set of students all across the city have access to these programs.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Leslie Murphy.
So I believe in gifted education or accelerated education, but to have one standardized test given to a 4-year-old to determine the trajectory of their educational path is absolutely ridiculous in my eyes. I did it with my daughter and I had to promise like 3 ice cream cones for her to get in there. So, one day is going to determine what a kid's path is. I don't think that is the right way to go. I want to revamp G&T efforts to expand to all schools or most schools, especially in the outer boroughs, but a narrower focus where children can be better identified on where they accelerate and where they need help. We cannot fully segregate our young learners based solely on aptitude. We just can't. And as I told you, and I guess in my intro, how it happened for me was it really formed my opinions on this, and I remember it. But incorporating accelerated learning plans in each school will remove the exclusivity of advanced learning that we have today, but also cater to each kid's needs. Listen, we all think our kids are wonderful at everything, right? But some of them are not, right? Some of them are great at math, not so great at English, or they have an artist touch, but maybe in science they need some help. That's where this type of G&T or accelerated learning, identifying kids on where they excel at and where they need help at, really, really helps. And not only does it help the child in an individualized plan, but it helps diversify schools in the long run. It's going to desegregate automatically as you get to the higher levels of school.
Thank you, Leslie. Susan Lee, how do you feel?
I don't have any children, so I don't have to go through the process of prepping my child for the gifted and talented exams, but I came through the system, right? I went to a special progress middle school and then got into a specialized high school where when I was at Brooklyn Tech in 1992, we had equal amounts of African-American, Hispanic, Chinese, and white students. And when I talk to my fellow Technites now, they were all at schools that had special progress programs. So I think that what is really important is to have these distinct special progress, gifted and talented classes within the school, but not have distinct gifted and talented schools, because the kids in these classrooms can intermix, can socialize with the general education students. And that, I think, will be more of a way of looking at diversifying the student population, because diversity is...
I don't want to stop you. I just want to remind everyone that the question's in the chat. And I'd love to know, what you think of the admissions process and how should it work then? If not a test, how should it work?
Oh, I think we should test. There is the testing component, and I think we should test. But I think that right now, I think the conversation is, there are multiple entryway, it's not just at 4, you can test in later on. So there are mechanisms that you can get in. Now with the subjective teacher's recommendation, that has been found to be biased, and so I think that we need to kind of look at one model, and perhaps which is more of an objective model, is to test students, potential students for these gifted and talented programs.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate that. And sorry to interrupt. I wanted to just make sure that we're on topic and that everyone knows the questions in the chat in case you want to
Right.
refresh. So thank you. And Maud Maron, let's go to you.
Sure. I think, look, big picture in New York City right now, our mayor and our chancellor has spent an awful lot of time trying to get rid of the schools that work the best in New York City, the schools that are doing the best job of educating students really well, when clearly we need to focus on sorry, interruption there. A little, you know, we need to focus on the schools that are struggling the most. I would hold on to the G&T programs and schools that we have. What I would do in terms of diversifying our schools is I think that objective test really makes the best sense for the reasons that Susan said. There's really demonstrable bias in subjective measures. And what we could do is make any kind of testing program opt out, so that kids could take a test during the day in their school, and there should be gifted and talented options in every single district in our city. It's almost absurd if you look at the map of districts where there aren't district and talented programs. So you could have kids, I fully agree with having different opt-in periods at later grades, because some kids don't read early, they read later. Having young ages means that you're missing kids who could benefit enormously from programs. I also agree with what Leslie said about the fact that you could have accelerated math programs for kids, for that's where they shine, and that you're not necessarily, and you'd be in a gen ed class for another set of classes. But you can certainly get to, in middle school and in high school, specialized schools, whether it's specialized high schools or other schools where the entire school is geared towards an accelerated program. We have over 400 high schools in New York City. There's really no reason to pretend that we need to have the widest array of learner in every school. It's also an administrative hurdle that we're setting for ourselves that's too difficult to clear. So I think we should have give ourselves the widest array of options to meet learners where they are by having an opt-out kind of test, so that we pull in as many kids as possible in as many districts and neighborhoods as possible to have a really, truly diverse, gifted, and talented program.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you. And Maria Danzilo?
Yes, so I support gifted and talented programs. I would like us to expand them to make sure, as Maud said, that we have them in every district of the city. I think it's there's really no excuse for not having an option available in every single school for kids who are going to do better in an accelerated learning environment with a more rigorous curriculum. As I said before, I'm a mother of 3 children, and I know what happens when a child is not feeling challenged in a classroom. It really doesn't, it's not meeting the needs of a child when you're not providing them with an accelerated learning environment that's suitable for them. In terms of, the
Admissions.
I think that we need to talk to our teachers, our parents, and our community councils. Our community education councils, especially in my district. We have elections coming up. I've read the candidate statements of all the candidates and really impressed on the depth of knowledge of our parents and our administrators and our teachers in our district. And I'd really like to hear from them in terms of how they would recommend we move forward. I think there are options in terms of testing. I was in educational publishing for a good part of my career. I was a corporate lawyer, in-house counsel for a large publishing company. I worked on testing. I know that there are different ways to test. I know there are ways to measure test. And like I said before, if we are focused on early childhood education and smaller class sizes and identifying learning differences, I think we can have every child moving forward in the environment and at the rate that is appropriate for them, where the outcome is going to be the best. I know what it's like when a kid is not running for a particular track, but they do incredibly well when they feel successful and they feel strong and good self-esteem. So one size does not fit all, but we do need to have an option for children who want a more rigorous environment. So I support the G&T expansion.
Thank you, Maria. I appreciate that.
Thanks. Okay.
So we now have Gail Brewer in the house. I'd love to welcome her in. Gail, before we get to the question at hand, what we did with each of the candidates at the very beginning, we gave everyone a chance to, rather than tell us about themselves, we wanted to hear a little bit about their own experience K to 12, and however they'd like to share that and what they'd like to say about it. So before we get to the question, if you'd like to spend a minute just telling us that, please go ahead.
I mean, my experience was both public and private school, so I had a little bit of both, but where I was, there was no G&T, there was nothing except a regular suburban school. So it wasn't very interesting, to be honest with you. And certainly wasn't as good as some of the New York City schools. I don't know what else to add, but I was a little bit of both, to be honest with you. My kids all went to public school here in West Side of Manhattan.
Okay, thank you. And the question that we're all discussing right now is a hot topic. Please tell us your views on gifted and talented admissions, including thoughts on objective and/or subjective measures and ways to increase diversity. What are your thoughts on ways the program should be structured going forward, and specifically, should the DOE continue the current system of distinct gifted and talented classrooms and schools? And additionally, we're talking about whether or not we should be engaging educators who are currently in gifted and talented programs and parents in the forums that are being discussed about the future of gifted and talented programs, and whether or not they should be in secret, but with people listening and engaging in a fuller amount. So,
well, I'm always for people being engaged. As you know, I have been a supporter of the Anderson program over the years, and it's been through its ups and downs in terms of its existence. So, I have a record. But I just want to say, I agree with those who have said, I just came in because I was on another Zoom. But I believe, if my statistics are correct, just the need is that there were 11,000 citywide G&T students qualified and 350 seats. So what I'm trying to say is there is even more probably talent that would like to be in a G&T program. I know that when we went to the Bronx years ago to work with Borough President Diaz, he wanted to put in more G&T in the Bronx, and he was unable, we weren't able, as Manhattanites supportive, to get G&T sites located in the Bronx. So, and even in Brooklyn, there's only one in terms of the elementary school. So what I'm trying to say, and I agree with others that have said this, we want it to be diverse. Obviously, there are high schools, I know for sure, that are diverse, TAG being the best one, but you need to have opportunities in all 5 boroughs. And example is, and you know better than I as parents, you can't move a bus legally, DOE wise, from one borough to another. So I know lots of parents that get in to schools that are G&T, but they can't get there. And they don't want to travel 2 hours or an hour and a half in order to bring the child to the Manhattan school.
And how do you feel admissions should work?
Well, I think that you should have schools in all the boroughs, and then some of these 11,000 kids would get in.
And how would they get in? What measures would be used to get?
I mean, I think that's others to decide. Years ago, it used to be much more of a, you take the test, everybody takes the test, and if you don't want to take it, then you opt out. I mean, I don't think it would be bad to have, but the test has to be very different. The one that's being given now, I don't think is appropriate, because you might want to do it at an older grade. You might want to have a different kind of test, whether it's Stanford or Binet, which was years ago, cost a lot of money. So that was a challenge. It does have to be reviewed in terms of how the process works. So there's 2 issues. How does the process work? And should we have G&T? And I would argue we should have G&T. We should have more G&T, and it should be perhaps structured differently. But there are plenty of talented kids, just like there are talented athletes, talented artists, talented musicians. There are talented writers, math, scientists, and if they're going to get bored. Now, others state that you can pull them out. I'm just saying, I hear all the arguments from a.
Gail, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt here because
Okay.
we have to move on. Thank you for your thoughtful discussion on the topic. There'll be more to come. And next up, in fact, is a related question, or at least a topic that's near and dear to the hearts of many of the parents on this call, I'm pretty sure, and it regards admissions, particularly for middle schools. It's been a divisive issue for New York City parents for several years now. This became exacerbated during COVID when state tests were canceled and grading was heavily modified, including no failing grades for all, and no distinction between A's and B's and C's or numerical grading of any kind for elementary school students up to grade 5. Assuming a normalcy next year, or return to normalcy next year, how would you approach admissions for middle and high schools, including, but not limited to, screened admissions, use of standardized exams, diversity in admissions programs, I will also warn, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, as I have a 5th grader who is going to middle school this year and was a victim of the randomization process.
Okay.
We're going to start with Maud. We're going to start with Maud Maron on this one. Gail, you missed this part, so I'll
That's fine. Go
advise
ahead.
you on this. For each question, we are randomizing the list, and every person will be given the opportunity to speak once at the beginning and once at the end. It might vary slightly for you, but the order was determined in advance. First up here is Maud Maron. Maud.
Sure. I have served on the Community Education Council for District 2. I'm in my 4th year now, so we have discussed and debated, mostly civilly, but not always civilly, all of these issues because they produce strong feelings. And I think that the city has gone in the exact opposite direction than the direction that we should be going in. Individual schools that used to have their own testing mechanism, Lab Middle School, which doesn't happen to be in City Council District 1, but lots of City Council District 1 families like to access that school, used to give their own test. Enormously successful program, a program that served lots of families that were kids living, that were what we designate in the DOE, free and reduced price lunch, but we're talking about families that are not rich, low income families that are accessing a really high quality education at a school that does a good job delivering it, and they use an admissions metric. Since it was so successful, and since it did such a good job delivering a good education to a group of kids who certainly needed it, there's no reason to stop that. What we have to do is focus on the schools that are struggling, not focus, as this administration has, on the schools that have been successful. The argument, of course, is that if you get rid of G&T, if you get rid of specialized high schools, if you get rid of screened admissions, that you're somehow going to solve for a diversity issue. There's no evidence of that. What we're doing is tearing down programs that have been very successful, and we're not solving for increasing the academic rigor across the board for all kids or solving for diversity metrics that everybody wants to solve for. So I think we should absolutely let individual schools and principals institute screening programs that they know are appropriate for their schools. We should support those programs where they exist. And we should certainly be listening to parents who said overwhelmingly at every single forum that this Department of Education held, that they wanted to hold on to these screen programs because they've done a really good job of producing the kind of high quality schools that parents want to access. Creating more, not fewer schools is what we should be doing.
Thank you. Just have to interrupt, but thank you for wrapping up. Next up is Susan Lee. I also, before you begin, Susan, I do want to remind everybody that we are posting questions in the chat if people later on in the list want to refresh their memories on what was asked. But Susan, you're up next.
Thank you. So, returning back to normalcy, I think is something that we all want. And so I think right now, I would prioritize, I would use district priority. I will continue to use that. I think that there's been a lot of uncertainty, and I think that this is one of the things that hasn't changed, right? Your district. And so I would continue to use that. I would also look at, I would also continue with screen admission. I think that's really important. I agree with Maud, what she said, let the principals decide and, prioritize what their students' needs are. I think that at the end of the day, we need to look at ways that it would be an equalizer for students to get in, because a lot of the students right now, are coming from, immigrant families that want to go into these special gifted schools. And so I think it's really important, but also at the same time, I think that if we start investing in poor performing schools or high poverty schools and lift up education as a whole, I think that it will be an equalizing effect for all the schools in the citywide.
Okay, thank you. Could I probe you a little bit more on district priority? They removed it at the high school level, and it still is retained at the middle school level.
That's correct. Yes, for middle school. I assume you were talking about middle school because you were talking
Does it
about.
pertain to both middle schools and high schools?
Oh, no. I was referring to middle school because you were talking about your child. So I assume it was a middle school question.
Okay. Thank you for answering that. Do you have an opinion on high school as well, quickly?
No, I think high school, for high school kids, they can travel to other schools within the city and really get a well-rounded, enriched education with different various students from different backgrounds. So I don't think district priority should be in high schools.
Okay. Next up is Leslie Murphy. And I will post the order in the chat as well.
Thank you. So the problem with the DOE is that they keep taking things away with certain philosophies they have, but then they don't put anything in its place. So it's kind of like this, they take away the G&T test, or they take away, getting into the junior highs, and then they don't really put a comprehensive solution in to take its place. I do agree that district priority stays for middle school. I think that should definitely stay. So I talked earlier about when kids are young. I think they thrive and succeed when they're placed in multi-level classrooms, right? On both ends, whether they're accelerated learner or whether you are have some sort of learning disability, right? That is proven. That is study after study. Now, I think as you get older, it gets a little more specialized. So I do think that there has to be, I agree with the others, that the junior high schools where it gets a little more specialized, but I still think that there shouldn't be exclusivity in junior high schools. I don't think we should start separating kids in junior high schools and say, you're all accelerated learners or you're all testing in here. I think that these accelerated learning should be really individualized programs. I think it should be, like I said, if you're good at math, then you have an accelerated learning in math, but you're not so great at art. So, you're in the gen ed. That's what I believe. Now, if I'm going to get to the high schools, I don't know if you're going to talk about the SAT, or if I should talk about that now. I can do that now. I don't support in eliminating that. I think I also don't support that it should be the sole decider on admissions to specialized high schools. What I think is that when we are trying to diversify in junior high schools and high schools, we're too late. We're too late because it has to be done at the early levels. Because if we're trying to force a square peg into a round hole, then it's in junior high and high schools, we're too late. We have to do it in the early ages, and that's going to level itself out naturally when it gets to the junior high and the high school levels.
Okay, thank you. Next up, Julie Menin.
Well, I believe students should have the right to attend a neighborhood school close to home. And this is honestly personal to me, as I chaired Community Board 1 for 7 years after 9/11. And we saw firsthand the need for families to be able to be near their children and to quickly reach them. I do believe academic acceleration is something that we clearly value in New York City school systems. But with that said, we want a much broader, more diverse group of students to have access to these programs. And accelerated learning should be an option in every school for every child, without taking apart the existing schools. So in sum, I believe we can reform and add to the current approach without dismantling it. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think you can give parents a choice while also increasing diversity and inclusion, which are incredibly important that we do so. On specialized high schools, I believe the test should not be the sole criteria considered. I think the test should be one component along with grades and essays and teacher recommendations. And quite frankly, I also think we should be building more specialized high schools to allow a broader, more diverse group of students to be able to attend them.
Thank you. Kush, you're muted. So
Oh, sorry about that.
yeah, Gail Brewer, we'd love your response next, please.
Okay. In terms of the middle schools, I support what District 15 and District 3. Let's see if it works in terms of their ideas. I don't know. So far, Booker T seems to be okay with the project, and that's certainly one school that everyone wants to get into. I also know that the sibling policy got screwed up big time, and I'm opposed to not having a sibling policy. I think there should be a sibling policy, and it got lost in the shuffle. In terms of high schools, I agree with Julie in the sense that John Liu will figure it out. He has said the same thing, which is he's in charge. The mayor may not know that, but he's in charge of the 3 high schools. And so the mayor's gonna have to deal with him, and everybody else has to deal with him. And I think he's said very clearly, the test is not the only opportunity for getting in, but certainly it's other criteria, but it should be thought about in a more holistic manner. But he's in charge of those schools. I'm very close to math and science, and a lot of the other 8 or 7 that are run by the city of New York. To the best of the ones in Manhattan are very diverse. I don't know why we couldn't have more like them. I founded the McCourt High School. I'm the founder of that high school. It is a screen high school, and it is diverse. So the issue is you've got to have diversity. And however, but there are plenty of students who could fit into those criteria. It is hard in communities because the school, at least in Manhattan, there's a big to-do about the District 2 high schools. And there's a lot of issues that have to be addressed, but actually, I don't think your question is the most important one.
Okay. Could you clarify one item in your answer? You said you want to see how District 15 and other pilots work, or you think they're working correctly?
No, I think so far, I think you probably don't like them, but I think they probably are working. But it's only been a few. I think 15 is 2 or 3 years. You know better than I. And District 3 just started, so let's see how it works.
Okay. I think it'd be tough to gauge a response during these times, but let's move on. Next,
that's just honest. I don't think you're going to like that answer, but I'm saying that's my answer. So you guys may not like it. That's my answer.
Next up is Maria Danzilo.
Sure. Well, I can't think of an issue that has caused more stress for parents in my district than the specialized high schools and the middle school entrance. I just can't believe that in the middle of a pandemic where people are incredibly stressed out, huge issues that the Department of Education would, cancel basically grades, school, everything. I mean, we're really, it was, can you punish people more than this? I think you'd have a hard time coming up with something that was more punishing to families and parents than how our families were treated this past year by the Department of Education. There's just no excuse for this. We're spending $28,000 a year on our students, and it was a shambles. And I say that this is failed leadership across the board. The people who are in power right now should really be ashamed of themselves for putting our parents through this. In terms of middle and high school admissions, I absolutely support district priority for middle school. I think what we need to do is look at how are we going to stabilize this for the parents who are really worried about what they're going to do next year. We have people leaving the city because of the schools. I have families and parents tell me all over the district, if we don't fix our schools, I'm out of here. Our zip code has seen the highest exodus of families and parents. Do you know that last month Zillow had more 3 and 4 bedroom apartments for sale than they've had in like 10 years? So we're seeing parents fleeing the city. And this is a reality, and we need to open our eyes to it, and we need to start providing our families with some solutions. We need to be clear, specific, and concrete about what it is we're going to do so that families like Kush, I've walked in your shoes, families like Kush and others who are suffering through this process are getting some clear answers. In terms of screened admissions, look, not one size fits all. These screened high schools are for kids who like to do well on tests. I have one of my kids came out of the SAT when she was very young. She loved standardized tests. And she was like, can I take another one tomorrow? This is not for everybody, but there are different schools for that purpose. There are many wonderful schools in this city that aren't testing, that you don't need to test to get in, and they're in very, very high demand. I want to see more of these schools. Let's expand those schools.
Maria, can I interrupt for a moment? Just ask you to
For
wrap it up.
expanding our schools.
Thank you for
Don't
that.
interrupt. I'm enjoying this.
I am too, actually. Keep going.
I'm
Why
very
don't-
passionate about this. I'm, as a mother and I work in education publishing, this is a subject I'm very comfortable with. I'm very comfortable talking about it. I'm not afraid to talk about it. I'm not running from it. I think we need to address it. I think we need to address COVID. I think we need to be honest with our parents and transparent with our parents. There's a lot of lack of transparency in the Department of Education. Things happen, we don't know about it. The parents aren't included. Our CEC is not included. Decisions are made. I've been on the receiving end of decisions that were made secretly. It's why I'm running for city council, by the way. So it's lack of transparency. We want to bring transparency to government, and that is number one priority. Let's get the Department of Education working for our schools. Let's start looking at our schools as serving the needs of our students, not the needs of everybody else.
Thank you, Maria Danzilo. I wish I could give you my time with the next question, but on that note, last question, I believe, since we're almost out of time, is to what degree should the Department of Education have control over individual school policies, including admission and curriculum, versus principals and district superintendents? And for this question, we will start with Leslie Murphy.
So I think most of us probably didn't need COVID to highlight why it's a bad idea to have the mayor's office hold such outsized power over the largest public school system in the country. But this past year has made it more evident. If parents had been constituents or going to their Board of Ed members asking what's the plan when COVID arrived, for example, it's likely that the transparency would have been much greater than trying to get answers out of the lockbox that the mayor's office created. And this comes back actually to two of the deepest values of my campaign: transparency and accountability. Having the DOE run by a chancellor selected by the mayor, of course, and influenced by a parent education panel on which 60% of the members are appointed by the mayor encourages there to be very little accountability to anyone but the mayor, right? I mean, it's like having a cigarette company make up a panel and asking them if smoking is healthy. I mean, so I strongly believe that parents through SLTs, CECs, PTAs, and just general parental involvement should have a prominent seat at the table when deciding programs, policy, curriculum, especially for their specific school. And the educators and the principals of those schools know what's best for their students and their schools. And I think this will allow direct attention to the needs of the students and the family populations of a school and a district for that matter. And it will help further individualize programs of education equality. One of the biggest administrative failings of the DOE right now is the clunky and cumbersome nature of decision-making. So broadening the input and power to substantially include parent bodies and educators specific to the district and schools will help quicken the response time, allow for flexible programming, and create a specific understanding of school issues.
Thank you, Leslie. Maria Danzilo.
So in 2000, by the way, Leslie, that was a great response, and I agreed with much everything you just said. I just want to say that in the 2019 year, the Department of Education was put on the comptroller's watch list, one of 3 agencies, because of rapidly increased spending and meager measurable results. So, and we haven't seen measurable results. Why on earth would we continue to make the same mistake and have the Department of Education have control over all of these individual school policies, et cetera? What we need to do is empower our CECs, our teachers, our parents, our students, our administrators to have a voice in how we go forward. I definitely want to see district superintendents empowered. With that said, we do need some oversight in terms of spending and pedagogy to make sure we have a fair and equitable education system. But in terms of control over individual school policies, we really do need to look at the Department of Education as a facilitator and not as the decision maker.
Thank you. And thanks for the time. Quick. And next, Gail Brewer.
I feel strongly that it should be local principal, CEC, superintendent. There are way too many people at 52 chambers. Their salaries are too high. The former chancellor brought in people from around the country who lasted about 5 minutes. There is money coming, millions and millions of dollars coming from the AQE decision in Albany from the foundation aid. And this is the time to do things very, very differently. We obviously need transparency. We need accountability. It's not easy. There's a very large agency. And I don't know who's going to be mayor. Whoever it is should appoint somebody who will not want to pack the 52 chambers with his or her buddies. So yes, I believe I have many, many friends are principals. We probably need a better crop of principals too, as great as the ones are. And we know District 3, but I have the vision of the whole borough. And there are some real gaps. So it's a very important to undo the current process in terms of who's in charge of day-to-day operations and not have this, craziness of you have to have your bulletin board look a certain way. That was a beginning in 2014. Terrible, terrible edict from 52 chambers, and it just got worse. So the question though is, what exactly do you want to get out of discussion? Is it a universal, some kind of curriculum? Our curriculums are sadly lacking in communities of color. There's a lot of concern about that. The principals need some guidance, but they definitely need to make some of their own decisions about food, about after school, about social workers, about how they spend their money. And now they're going to have enough money to do all the above. And they could do gifted and talented, they could do different athletics, they could do music and art. They will hopefully have good leadership to do it. That is the key. The principal and the teachers, obviously parents, but we need really good principals and really good teachers.
Thank you so much. Susan Lee, how do you feel?
Thank you. I think there should be collaboration between the Department of Education and the principals and the superintendents. I agree with what the speakers before me said that, in terms of admission standards and curriculum, we should leave it with the superintendents and the principals with buy-ins from the parents, the CEC, because they are the ones with the ears to the ground and they know what's important for their district. However, I think that the Department of Education should hold the principals accountable, which is why there needs to be a collaborative effort. And I agree with Gail, there needs to be transparency. We need to know what's going on at the Department of Education. So I think that, at the end of the day, the principals and the superintendents are the ones who are in the trenches and know what's going on.
Okay, great. Thank you. Julie Menin.
Well, I agree with what Gail said and what others have said. I mean, parents and superintendents should obviously have more say. Parents that I speak to in Council District 5 feel completely left out of the process. We need more input from them. We need more input from our superintendents, from our educators. We need to empower our CECs. I mean, let's be honest, DOE is a huge bureaucracy, and it can't just come from the top down. It needs to come more from the bottom up with more parental input. I will tell you, previously as Commissioner of Consumer Affairs, I launched a project called NYC Kids Rise, where we seated 10,000 kids in Queens District 30 with a college savings account. Getting through the DOE bureaucracy, the project almost didn't happen. And I was a commissioner, and trying to get it through was near impossible. So I'm just saying that we've got to really make sure that parents, superintendents, so many others feel that they have a direct dialogue with DOE. We have to make sure that this happen. And I think, certainly having people in the city council who have a history on these issues is going to be incredibly important to actually change the system.
Thank you. And Maud Maron, I'd love to hear your answer.
Sure. I will say that, principals and superintendents obviously should be making decisions. Superintendents for school districts are mandated by state law, not just in New York City, but throughout all of New York State. That position is mandated by state law. It needs to be there, should be the final decision making for the district. Chancellor Kranza brought in executive superintendents. We should get rid of them immediately because they're absolutely zero value added. In my own personal experience, it's been incredibly hard to get the Manhattan executive superintendent to be responsive to any concern about education. And there is really great interference in the ability of principals and superintendents to do their job when there is an incredible layer of bureaucracy above them. I also think the more local we are in decision makings about school, the better. Mayor Bill de Blasio brought in the School Diversity Advisory Group, which didn't have a single educator from a specialized high school on it and didn't have any representation from gifted and talented programs on it. Is it any surprise that this mayor's panel decided to target specialized high schools and gifted and talented programs as if they were part of the problem and not a path towards the solution? We need local control so that principals and parents and school districts can contribute to what they know works, particularly because the DOE is managing and doing a poor job of it, considering that over 50% of our kids pre-COVID couldn't read, write, or do math at a grade level. But the DOE is managing the largest school district in the entire country. A one-size-fits-all wouldn't work in many school districts around the country. It certainly doesn't work in the largest school district in the country. The effort to get rid of our grades, to get rid of admissions priorities and that we've seen in this past year has been incredible overreach that has done a lot of damage to our schools. We don't need it. We shouldn't have to put up with it. And I would absolutely get rid of pretty much all of the administrative bloat that goes above the superintendent and focus our resources on actually what goes on in the classroom for children as we make up for the learning loss of this year.
Wow. Thank you. Those are some powerful answers, and I really appreciate all the candidness. We need, for the sake of time, to move on now to the lightning round, which I know Kush is very excited about. So Kush?
Robin, I think you meant the lightning round. But in the lightning round, the questions will be mostly yes or no questions. Some of them will be A or B, some may be multiple choice. For time management purposes, candidates' response order is predetermined, but will rotate as we progress through the questions. Moderators will announce the order for the following the question. I also want to add a disclaimer for the purposes of the lightning round. Place wants to make incredibly clear that it is offered no prizes, cash prizes, door prizes, floor prizes, consolation prizes, swag bags, gift bags, tote bags, goodie bags, hotel accommodations, travel, airfare, fanfare, Xboxes, PlayStations, gift cards, or lottery tickets.
Okay, thank you, Kush.
On that note, Robin, why don't you start?
Okay. Do you agree with mayoral control of DOE? Gail?
Yes.
Maria?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Maud?
Yes, but I'd like a different mayor.
Julie?
Yes.
And Leslie?
Yes, and I was expecting a gift bag at the end of this.
Sorry,
Kush will work on that.
can't be done. Next up, should the NYPD maintain control over school safety agents? We'll start with Maria.
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Maud?
Yes.
Julie?
Well, I have a more nuanced answer here. So I do want to say I'm proud to have the support of Local 237, which represents the school safety officers. And I've talked with them about the issue and I've talked with parents and students. I do believe it's possible to keep it within NYPD, but we do need to at the same time address some concerns that have been raised on school safety. So that's my answer. So sorry for the long answer.
That's all right. I believe I left Leslie next.
Yes, for elementary and junior. And for me, same with Julie, I'm a little nuanced on high schools. I think the roles are different.
And lastly, Gail.
I think that the DOE can't manage any better than the NYPD. So I'm not sure that the DOE could do a better job. I think it needs a discussion. I'm not sure that you have to have a uniform, but I don't know that they could be social workers either. So I think it needs more discussion to answer your question.
Okay. Next question. Should the SHSAT be the sole admissions criteria for the 8 existing specialized high schools? Susan?
Yes.
Maud?
Yes.
Julie?
Well, I've said that I think it should be one of the criteria along with teacher recommendations, essays, and grades.
Okay. Thank you. Leslie?
No, it should be definitely a heavily weighted criteria
Gail?
with others, like Julie said.
Okay.
Same as I agree with Julie and with John Lou, who says the same thing.
Okay. They did break the rules since it was yes or no. So, but I do appreciate the clarity. Thank you. Gail?
No, I said that. I said the same.
Oh, sorry, Maria.
Yes.
You guys threw me off my lightning round.
Well,
Push.
that's okay. We'll move it along. Question number 4. Should we expand the number of seats for specialized high schools? We'll start with Maud.
Yes, and the number of schools.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. Julie is next, and Leslie will be up after her.
I just want to make sure I heard the question. You said, should we expand the number of seats in the specialized high schools? Was that the question?
That is the question.
Yes, I do think we should expand that. Yes, thank you.
Leslie?
A giant yes.
Gail?
Yes, particularly those like math and science.
Maria?
Yes, and the number of schools.
And Susan?
Yes, and the number of schools.
Robin? You're up. I'll go ahead. Under the current contract of the UFT, public schools have 6 hours and 20 minutes of school per day, which is 1 to 2 hours less than the top performing charter school. What do you believe should be the minimum amount of school hours?
Minimum amount of school hours when the UFT contract is up for renewal. Julie?
So what should be the minimum number of school hours? I don't know that I have like a magic bullet there. I agree.
Should it be more than 6 hours and 20 minutes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are ways to get that day longer. And I think it's a question of a dialogue directly with the UFT on that to get obviously their input. So I'm totally open to that.
Okay. Leslie?
Yes, I would aim around a 7. Not too much more, but I think we can definitely squeeze more out of them.
Okay. Gail?
More hours, but more importantly, none of my schools in the borough do not have after school, for goodness sake. So you got to have after school too.
Okay. Maria?
Yes, a longer school day and as close to the charter schools as we can get with a union negotiation. That's a longer day.
Susan?
Yes, longer days.
Thank you. And Maud?
Yes, I think we are facing, I just want to say that right now we've lost an hour out of school. So even kids who are in school right now I'm picking up my child at 2 p.m. instead of 3 p.m. from elementary school these days for reasons that are entirely unclear. When you're back in school, you should be back in school for real.
Mhm.
Equity would require that we provide working families with the ability to have kids in school from 9 to 5, and that will have to be a combination of school and after school.
Okay, thank you, Maud. For our next question, I know this is a topic that's also near and dear to many of the parent leaders sitting in on this call. It regards PTA funding. Should PTA funds be shared with other schools? First up on this is Leslie.
Yes, at discretion. I'm a big proponent of that, by the way.
Julie?
I think parents and PTAs need to have the ultimate say over that. And I do think that we have a whole philanthropic community here in New York City, and we honestly need the larger philanthropic community. The large foundations could play a leading role in helping underfunded schools. So I think we need to bring those larger foundations to the table, but make sure that the parents of the PTA are ultimately, leading the decision about where funds should be allocated.
Okay. Maud?
No, I think that this subject that has come up recently is a bit of a red herring, and it doesn't. I agree with Julie. There are certainly more. There's certain better ways to look at the way to get private money to public schools that need it. I think we are not going to be successful in putting the responsibility to fund schools, especially when we've just received so much federal money that are below funding levels, on other school communities. I think individual schools should be able to support their schools in the way that they think is appropriate.
Okay. Susan?
Yes, I think they should share their PTA funds with other schools, just because I know that some schools, some parents are having a hard time fundraising at other districts. So I think we should share the funds.
Well, Maria is up next, but after this question, I do want to keep these to yes or no questions. The next one should be easier. It's A or B. Maria and lastly, Gail, you can have quick, short answers.
Sure. I think it should be up to the local school to decide if they want to share. But I think if it's something that is creating, that it's not being done in a way that's really getting funds into a broader range of schools, we need to look at it again at a later time. But for right now, I think we should just leave it up to the schools to decide. And I do think there should be other sources of funding that we should look at.
Okay. And Gail.
Right now, I think that the schools should decide if they want to share, but there are hundreds of underfunded schools. Now, whether the schools that have 2 teachers in every room are funded by the parents in many cases, and it is unfortunate that the other schools cannot do that. Now, maybe this foundation aid could assist in that way, but we do have a problem, and foundations don't help. They're just not doing anything. Hopefully this foundation aid will, but I think the parents that raise the money have a decision to make themselves. On the other hand, the schools are severely, even with Title I, are severely underfunded, and this foundation aid has got to go to them to be able to do some of the work that the funded schools by the parents do, arts and 2 teachers in every room as an example.
Thank you. So the next question will be A or B. Very easy. And all we want is A or B. Question will be, this will be an A or B question. In your opinion, which do you believe creates the best learning environment? Answer A, similar ability classrooms where no child is more than 1/2 a grade level above or below the average student in the class. Or answer B, mixed ability classrooms where there is no sorting of kids based on level of academic readiness. Kids more than a year above grade level might be in the same class with kids 2 years below grade level. Julie.
Well, from what you said, I mean, I think it would be A, because I think you want to make sure that kids are being able to learn at the appropriate level.
Okay, thank you. Maud?
A.
Susan?
A.
Maria?
A.
Gail?
A.
Leslie?
A.
Awesome. Nice job. It was quick. This year, state tests were opt-in instead of normal opt-out. Was this a good idea? Maud?
No, a particularly bad idea after schools being closed, because a meaningful assessment so that we can figure out which kids need more help coming back to school was crucial this year.
Thank you, Susan.
No.
Maria?
No.
Gail?
No.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, no. No, can you?
I hear you. Gail said no. Leslie?
No.
And Julie?
No.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we're going a little out of order, warning you, Robin, but this year, the state test included some recycled questions from 2018. This is brand new news that came out today, or yesterday, perhaps. This is a multiple choice question in honor of the students who took the ELA today in the past few days. Were the 2018 state test questions recycled because A, it was New York's way of sticking it to the federal government. B, the DOE did not know how to properly score these tests without 2018 data. C, it would show little learning loss in New York. Or D, all the above. We'll start with Maria.
I'm going with D.
Gail?
I have no idea. I just have absolutely no idea whatsoever. I'll be honest.
Okay. It behooves you to guess on standardized tests, so.
I don't know anything about it. I'm not gonna make it up. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna make it up.
Leslie.
Yeah, I would probably
Post
say,
it in the chat, sorry.
yeah, that's what I'm looking at. I'm sorry, it's a lot. I would say D just for the fun of it, but I really don't, I'm not sure.
Julie.
I agree with Gail. I'm not going to hazard a guess on something that I'm not familiar with.
Maud.
I think it's disappointing and frustrating and most likely a combination of those reasons. So D, it would be my answer.
And Susan?
B.
B?
D.
D. Well, unfortunately, this is a trick question, as many of
And
our fifth
Kush,
graders.
can you let him know that I got this right when you asked me?
She did. It's a trick question, as many of our fifth graders are subject to. In fact, the DOE does not score the test. The New York State of Education does. And the most compelling evidence would be that it would show little learning loss in New York. So sorry for Robin.
Well, now my question is going to seem boring, but do you support keeping the Regents exam as a criteria for high school graduation? Susan?
Yes.
Maria?
Yes.
Gail?
Yes.
Leslie?
Yes.
Julie?
Yes.
Maud?
Yes.
And because Kush spoke for so long, I'm going to do the next question. If you could provide only one of the following three in a middle school program, which would it be? A, physical education, B, arts, music education, or C, technology and engineering? Maria?
Oh, do I really have to pick one of those? Can I have all three? I guess I'm going to go, it's a tough one. C, I guess.
It's a tough one. I agree. Gail?
Arts.
Leslie?
Absolutely arts.
Julie?
Yes, as a daughter of an artist, I'd say absolutely arts. And I mentioned my mom went to LaGuardia, so definitely arts.
Maud?
I'm sorry, Robin, can you repeat the question? I didn't hear the question.
Sorry, Maud, you missed that question. If you could provide only one of the following three in a middle school program, would it be physical education A, arts, music education B, or technology and engineering C?
Oh, I would have to go with physical education because I think our kids can't learn if they're not moving.
Is that's the end of the question? Well, there's one last question we're going to end with.
Susan?
C.
Apologies.
No worries. C.
No, I'm sorry, Susan.
Did everyone get to answer? Okay. We're going to close with our last question of the lightning round. It's going to be, what is your favorite subject in high school? Just the one twist here, because I like twists. We'll do ranked choice voting, and you may rank up to 3 choices. We'll start with Gail.
Certainly English. What else I like? History. What else did I like? And science. Those are my favorites.
Thank you. Leslie?
I would say PE, because I became an athlete in college, definitely number one. Number two, history. And number three, English. And I became a writer.
Okay. Julie?
I would say history and then English and then math.
Maud?
I would go history, English, and then probably Spanish.
Susan?
History, English, and math.
And lastly, Maria.
English, art, and history.
Thank you all for taking that test. You all did quite well, except for that trick question, of course, which I can only apologize. And I'll hand this over to, I think that lends us still with the lightning round, or should I say lightning round, and we'll leave it to Robin next.
Well, I think now we're moving on to breakout rooms.
Oh, God.
I think we just want to share a few words before we do that. And I do want to point out that we kind of exceeded the original time, as well as much of the breakout time. So I don't know how much time candidates have left, but we do still have breakout rooms organized for all of you.
But before we go to breakout rooms, I just want to say thank you so much. I know it's already 8:30 on whatever night this is. It is a Tuesday night. I want to say thank you to all of the candidates for sharing their perspectives and sharing a little bit about themselves and sharing their souls. And we look forward to hearing more from you before the elections. So thank you, and thank you to the attendees who are watching.
I'd also like to thank all the place members. We had a lot of people working very hard behind the screens. In particular, I'd like to thank Craig Slutskin, Hunter Dare, Dean Hahn, Dan Morden. I'm sure I'm missing a few. I also want to point out that part of the place on Place's radar, and I think all of our radars, is upcoming CEC elections. which will be starting on May 1st and are voting through May 11th. In advance of that, Place does intend to do an event on May 3rd, voting in the CEC election, what, why, and how. Please look out for that. And thank you again. Thank everyone for coming, and thank all the participants and attendees who showed up to listen to my corny jokes. And we're gonna go into the breakout rooms. There should be, if you click on the bottom, towards the bottom right corner, should be a breakout room icon. If you don't see it, it may very well be because you have an outdated version of Zoom, which I would exit, update, and come back. Yeah, one of the moderators will be joining each of the candidates in their breakout rooms, and Craig will be staying here to help people be assigned. And with that, I'd like to close.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.